here is Kwan. She's at Square, and she's going to tell you some of the stories of how things could get better in their process improvements that they use at Square. So, and all joking aside, Erica's also from Canada. If you look at our program, we have a lot of Canadians speaking today. I just want to be clear, we love Canadians. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. There we go, yay. Hi. My name's Erica, and this is where you can find me on the internet. And I am so excited to tell you about all the mistakes that we've made at Square. So, I'm just going to take a minute and do a little bit of audience participation. I want people to put their hands up if they feel like they've learned a lot by emulating people who have been really successful. So, hands? Cool. Okay. My next question is, how many of you feel like you've learned a lot by looking at the mistakes you've made or other people have made? So it seems like it's a little bit more. This is why I picked this topic. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Ooh. Oh, see, I'm making mistakes already. Nobody is perfect, including everyone that I've ever worked with. But I feel like at Square, we like to learn from our mistakes and then mitigate them. Make sure that we don't repeat things and that we have a good process for dealing with them when they come up. And I figured that there'd be some good lessons in there for you guys as well. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is our build system that we had at Square. I think I'm going to freak coordinates out a little bit by saying that at some point our test suite took like an hour and 20 minutes to run. It was massive. I mean, it was massive for a reason though. We're like writing code related to payments and moving money, and so we need to test this like incredibly rigorously. So we wanted to distribute our build system. Originally, we were using cruise control.rb, and again, it was taking like an hour and 20 minutes to run our entire test suite. So we decided during a fix-it week at Square, which basically was a week that everybody took in the company to just fix stuff, we decided to build a distributed build system. So a bunch of our IT guys went over to Apple and just bought like 22 Mac Minis and came back. And then we had each of these Mac Minis run a portion of our test suite and then push a tag if their tests were successful. And at the same time, each of these build machines would check to see if all the other build machines had pushed a tag. So the last build machine that figured out that all the tests had been successfully would push another tag and then push a branch. Like so. Unfortunately, this caused a little bit of a problem. We ended up with a lot of tags, around 15,000 of them. Look, something like this. So we're like, maybe we should delete some tags. So we're like, all right, we need our build machines to delete some tags. We're going to take all of the build machines and get them to delete tags that were older than a month. However, this caused a different problem. It caused this problem. So, how this happened, was that our build machines were deleting these tags. But then when we did a deploy, our deploy host would do a git pull. It would be like, hey, all these tags are deleted, but I'm not going to delete them locally. And then later, it did a git push, and then all these tags got deleted or recreated again. So we had this cycle of tag deletion and recreation, and yeah, so we were just doing that. So we're really sorry, GitHub. This is the error that we got when our build machines were trying to delete a tag and then do a git push. As you can see, we had a bunch of build machines trying to delete the same tag, so we got this block error. So I think the main problem with this was that we took a week and we concentrated on creating this distributed build system. And then we kind of went back to working on the stuff that we were working on before. We would poke at it every once in a while, but we really never dedicated enough time to making it good. I feel like if we had people who were working on this constantly, we wouldn't have had this problem, or we would have at least caught it a lot sooner. So development tools are important, and they should be prioritized as so. I mean, when you're working on them, it doesn't feel like you're necessarily doing real work, because you're not doing anything that's like directly impacting the user. But this helps you to move quickly, and if you move quicker, then you get more stuff out. So Rob, who's right there, he works on our internal build system, along with a bunch of other people, but he owns it. And it looks something like this right now. Sorry that it's kind of cut off over there. Anyway, we have a master build machine, and we have a bunch of other build machines. And the master build machine partitions the tests to all the other build machines, uses rescue. Then each of those build machines run the tests. And then the master build machine checks to see if all the tests have been completed successfully. And then it's in charge with creating a tag and then pushing to GitHub. So we're only doing one now, as opposed to a lot. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is a user-facing feature. I don't feel like it's something that we made any terrible technical mistakes around or any bad architectural decisions. This is more to do with process. When a user signs up for Square, they have to give us a couple of pieces of information about themselves. We need to know that they are who they say they are. So we ask them for their address, their social security number, and their phone number. Once they do this, we do a quick identity check. So we had built this on our website, but then we thought, hey, why don't we let users do this on their mobile devices? That means that they can sign up for Square in like 5 minutes and start taking payments. But unfortunately, this feature took forever. It took forever for several reasons. When we were starting to work on this, we weren't sure what pieces of information we would need from the user. So we were like, do we need their SSN? Can we get away with not asking them for their social security number? We weren't sure. So we decided that we were going to mobilely render web pages within our client. This way, we wouldn't have to wait on Apple to like get approval for the client to get it out later. We could just do deploy, and then the changes would go out. But we didn't have the testing framework or the testing infrastructure in place for this stuff. So we had to add Selenium to our Cucumber test suite. We had to build a complicated JavaScript library to deal with the transitions and interacting with the native widgets on our client. We also made the assumption that if everything worked okay on iOS, that it would work okay on Android. This is not the case. So I just thought I'd briefly go through the flow. This is what it looked like when we were doing it with mobilely rendered web pages. And as you can see, it looks okay. It looks a little bit Railsy here, especially with those error messages. So we wanted it to look really native, and we wanted it to fit in with our applications. And we have really high design standards. We want everything to be simple and clean. So I mean, it's okay, as you can see, but it's not as perfect as we wanted. The users have to answer questions about themselves as well. And send them a reader. So here's a snippet of code from that JavaScript library that I mentioned earlier. It's called SquareLift. And what this is doing is interacting with the native widget on the iOS client. So it took 10 weeks to finish this feature, which is a while. And when we got around to redoing it natively, which we did in both Android and iOS, it took like 3. And I feel like we should have realized at some point that we should have stepped back and just like evaluated the work that we were doing and figure out whether or not the work that we had done was just a sunk cost. Like we weren't going to get any return from that. I think I failed to mention this earlier, but at some point while we were working on this, we didn't have to worry about the information we needed from users changing. So that took that requirement out of having to change that form. But even though that happened, we were still like, oh, well, we put all this work into doing this. We want to see it through and get it done. But honestly, we probably should have around week 5 or 6 been like, hey, maybe we just should do this natively. So this is my favorite thing to talk about because it's something that I fucked up. So say you're a Square user, you've taken some payments, you want to get your money. So to get your money, you go to Square's website and you enter your bank account information. We send you a couple of micro deposits, and then you come and enter those micro deposits through the web. And this way we can verify your bank account. In the early days, we didn't have this feature. We just had a small set of beta merchants, and they were taking payments. We knew all of those people, but we had to add this feature if we wanted to have more users. So here's a screenshot of what it would look like. Someone would just come back and enter a couple of their micro deposits. And I worked on this with Cameron. Cameron is a co-founder of Square and one of the earliest developers. I wanted to embarrass him, but he was supposed to be here, but he's on his honeymoon right now. So yeah, but if you ever see him, this is totally his fault. So what we did is we created a state machine and added it to our bank account model. And so when a user went through and finished all this stuff, their bank account would be in a verified state. And we'd send them an email saying, hey, thank you for verifying your bank account with us. But we're like, oh, well, we have all these other merchants. We don't want to make them do all that stuff. Like, let's just set their bank account to verified. So we did that. But then this happened. And that was not good. So people started to notice this. And then TechCrunch noticed this. And this was a really, really crappy day. I'd gone into work on a Sunday to work on this, so I was kind of tired, and I'm like, oh, let's just get this out. And, I was there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and around 7 o'clock at night, this happened, and I'm like, oh God, why am I even here? So every time I work on something that might remotely affect anybody, I think about this day. And I'm like, is anyone going to get affected? Is anyone going to get an email? Am I going to do anything weird? I don't want to, cause any kind of confusion. So I think it seems really straightforward, but again, I missed this, and Cameron missed this. I don't want to make any excuses, but I'm going to make a small excuse right here. At this point, we had a really complicated deploy process. So me and Cameron did this complicated deploy to our staging environment. And we actually got all of those emails that the users would have gotten. They were sent to our email account, but we had a filter set up, so we didn't see any of them. But we were still really concentrating on doing that deploy. And so again, we did a succession, and we were like, oh, we got to make sure we do this right. So I briefly mentioned something that that was hard to do, and we've worked on that, and our deploy process is really simple. So we've made it harder to do the wrong thing. And now I want to talk about how we make it easy to do the right thing, especially when shit hits the fan, when mistakes happen, or just like unexpected behavior happens, and we just deal with it. So we do this with process. And I don't like process. I feel like the idea of process is a bunch of extra work that I need to do on top of my real work. It's something that slows me down. But the process that we use at Square is checklists. And these are actually incredibly helpful. So we have this book, the Checklist Manifesto. There's like a ton of copies around the Square office, and our CEO, Jeff Dorsey, encourages all new hires to read it. It's a really great book, and it talks about why checklists are important. So I ripped this example straight out of the book. So this is a checklist for what to do when your engine fails in a single-person Cessna airplane. And it's not that long, but you're freaking out because your engine failed, and you got to go through all these steps. But the top thing is the most important, because you're like, okay, I need to think about 1, 2, 3, 4, but at the same time, you have to remember to fly the airplane. And this doesn't necessarily occur to people, because you're like, I am super stressed. So you need that checklist. So now I want to talk about a specific example where checklists, or items in a checklist were incredibly important. Like even common sense things that you think about that you wouldn't think you would need a checklist for, you definitely do sometimes. So we have this process called on-call. We have a bunch of engineers acting as first responders to when things go bad, or if anybody needs support within the company. So every time, people are on for about a week, and then they switch off. So we have this short meeting called an on-call handoff meeting. And we basically go through this checklist. This is part of it. And yes, we talk about what's been going on, and then the next team can hand things off to the new team. So I've been at Square for a while, so I think I was on call like the second time that we ever had on call in place. And number 4 was not there. So we went through our checklist, and I was on call, and I think, I don't know, it was like a Wednesday, and I was heading into work. And then I realized that something had come up, like I got like an email about an incident that I needed to take care of. But I was on the BART, and I couldn't do anything about it. So I'm like, okay, well I need to get a hold of somebody. And then I checked my phone, and I'm like, I don't have the phone number for anybody else right now, so I can't contact anybody. So as soon as I got back to the office, I put this in the list. And again, it seems really common sense, but we missed it. So I'd like to talk about a couple of meetings that we also hold. Like postmortems, for example, are meetings that we hold when an on-call team deals with like a major incident. So again, we use checklists here. And I hate meetings, but I feel like these meetings are really good. And they're really good because we do have this checklist, and we just go through the stuff we need to do, and then we get out. So we create a timeline of the things that happened for that particular incident. This one is specifically for an internal database server going down. And after that, we figure out what went well, what didn't go well. And then we come up with some action items. And these action items are supposed to help us prevent whatever happened before from happening again. So we do the same thing for these meetings called retrospectives. These are a little bit more open-ended. They're not about like something like a technical failure or anything like that. It's more about checking in with like the team, seeing how people are feeling about how we're like working and how the development process is going. So these are like, this is an example from, I don't know, I think about 6 months ago, something like that. And you can see things that we were happy about and then things that we were less happy about. And then these are the action items that we took from that. And of course, one of them involves drinking. So to wrap up, I want to challenge you to do something like this. And I have an example. If you can't think of something yourself. I'm sure all of you are avid bakers, just like me. And you've probably baked something where it didn't turn out very well. Like, say, for an example, a cake. And chances are it didn't turn out well because you didn't follow the directions exactly. Because baking is a science, it's not an art. So I challenge you all, the next time you are baking something, to follow the directions exactly. Go through that checklist. Make sure you do everything, and make sure you do everything right. And then after that, you'll have a very tasty cake. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share with you. I wanted to tell you about how Square isn't perfect, but we have a unique culture, we have a great development process, and we mitigate mistakes really well. That's it.
Thank you very much. We do have time for some questions.
Me on the internet.
Do we have another one? Oh, okay, it's just me here running microphones. So.
Hi, how do you test your iOS and Android apps?
Well,
Lightning talk.
yeah, lightning talk. We created a framework called KIF, and there is someone back there from our iOS team who would love to talk to you about it. His name is Jim, and he's going to do a lightning talk on it today.
Jim, can you stand up so we can see? Cool, thanks. Who else?
Hi. How fast was the deployment process after you went to distributed system? Or the build?
Yeah, it didn't really affect that. Our deploy process is unfortunately getting a little bit slow, but we've been...
Not the deployment, the build.
Oh, the build? Oh, yeah, sorry.
An hour and 20 to...
It went from an hour and 20 to around, say, 10, 12 minutes.
Have you considered that viewing the process as something that gets in your way and coming in on Sundays for long days might contribute to how things like that happen?
Don't mind him, he's just being snippy.
I think somebody's trying to troll me.
So, as experience, from experience with doing distributed testing, your build system, to be honest, is pretty ghetto, anecdotally pretty ghetto. Why did you go with that instead of just using custom tasks with Jenkins or BuildBot or something that is already built?
I'm doing this to you, Rob. So Rob Olson's here, and he's been owning it for a while. If you want to talk to him about that, I'm sure he'd be happy to.
Rob, do you have something to say in 2 seconds?
No.
Okay, so Rob's declining. Oh, here we go.
Go there.
So I was actually responsible for that PokeAS build system, and the reason was at the time we were in the ramp up to launching card cases, which hopefully you all get a chance to use also. And we basically had like 3 days testing out. We tried Jenkins, we ran into a bunch of problems with the way that it manages dependencies, because it's not. We could have broken this to build up a bunch of different sub-projects then instead like every one of these has to build. It was difficult to redistribute dynamically what we wanted to build. So it took us 3 days to put this thing together. And it actually worked for 6 months. So. And we are working on a replacement. I don't want to steal Rob's thunder, but stay tuned.
Thank you, Zach. Who else?
Could you talk a little bit about what your retrospectives look like, how that plays out?
Yeah, sure. So we used to do this with all of our engineers. So the company has been growing so fast that we now do it on a team-by-team basis. And usually we'll spend at most an hour doing one. We'll go into a room and we will do basically information gathering phase, where we basically draw a happy face, a mad face, and a sad face. And then we go around the room and everybody says what they're happy about, what they're mad about, and what they're sad about. So we spend like a half an hour doing that. We figure out which topics people want to talk about the most, and then we talk about them for a while. And then after that, we're like, okay, well, now that we've discussed it, what can we take away from it? How can we make things better? And then we come up with a list of action items. And once that's done, we assign them to people, and we make sure at our next retrospective that something has been done about those action items.
That process is actually described in a book called Agile Retrospectives. I don't recall the author's name, but it's a
Yeah,
good read.
I knew that, but I didn't want to put that in my slides because I haven't read it.
Oh, okay. Did we have someone here?
I'm curious whether you have any problems with your checklist becoming too familiar, and then you just kind of fly through them rather than actually checking the things you're supposed to be checking.
I don't know. I don't feel like I do that too much because most of our checklists are around stuff that is kind of like, again, it's like an on-call thing. So it's not something you're going through every day. Like when you're doing stuff a lot, that's probably a sign that you should be automating it rather than, following a checklist.
Okay, I think we're done. So it's now time for lunch.